My name is Eleanor Hayes, and I am 78 years old. For most of my life, I have been the strong one, the mother who never gave up, the widow who built an empire out of scraps, and the grandmother who believed family was everything. But that night, under the dim glow of the moon and the biting chill of December air, I stood at the edge of a freshly dug grave while my only daughter, Linda, held a shovel in one hand and a stack of legal papers in the other. Her voice was cold, shaking with fury, yet steady with intent as she hissed, "Sign the will or sleep in it." The world around me fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The smell of damp earth clung to the air as she pointed to the hole she had carved into the ground, deep enough to swallow a body. My heart raced, but my face stayed calm. I didn't flinch, not even when she stepped closer, her eyes glistening with a madness I had never seen in my little girl. She thought I was afraid, that I would tremble and beg. She didn't know me anymore. I looked at the papers she shoved toward me. They were neatly clipped, a false testament of ownership, demanding everything I had built, my home, my businesses, my savings, signed over to her. She had planned this. She had been planning it for months, maybe years. And she thought the grave at my feet would be enough to break me. "You have one choice, Mother," she said, her voice trembling now, a mix of desperation and rage. "Sign it, or you'll never see the sunrise again." For a moment, memories flooded me, holding her as a baby, her first steps, her wedding day, when I cried tears of joy. How had we come to this? How had the love I gave turned into this monster standing before me? But as much as it hurt, I stayed silent. I didn't scream. I didn't plead. Instead, I met her eyes and whispered, "You dug the wrong grave." She blinked, startled, but she didn't understand what I meant. Not yet. My fingers brushed the cold edge of the pen, but I didn't sign. I never intended to, because while she thought she held all the power, she didn't know whose name was already carved on that headstone behind her. The grave she dug was not for me, and soon she would realize the nightmare she had set in motion. Before she could react, headlights cut through the darkness, stopping just feet away from us. The car door slammed. Someone stepped out. Linda froze, her hands still gripping the shovel. I didn't move. The figure approached, their shadows stretching long across the dirt, and my daughter's bravado began to crumble. Who was walking toward us in the middle of the night? And why did Linda's face turn pale as the figure spoke my name? The real storm was only beginning. If you think this night was shocking, wait until you hear what led us here. You won't believe how love turned into betrayal, how a mother's silence became her greatest weapon, and how the truth buried in the past refused to stay underground. The night someone threatened my life was not the night everything started to fall apart, it was the night everything became clear. But to understand why my daughter, my own flesh and blood, would dig a grave for me, we need to go back months before the dirt clung to my shoes and the moon watched silently above us. I live in the quiet town of Ashwood, where everyone knows everyone. My house sits at the top of the hill, overlooking the valley where I raised Linda. This house wasn't just bricks and wood. It was my sanctuary, the dream my late husband and I built together from the ground up. After his passing, I poured myself into work, into investments, and over time, I became more successful than anyone had expected. People whispered, "Eleanor has it all," but what they didn't see was the loneliness behind my smile. Linda knew what I had, and she also knew the sacrifices I made for her. I sent her to college, helped her buy her first home, and when she divorced that sorry excuse of a man she married, I was there to pick up the pieces. But something changed after that divorce. The sweet girl I knew hardened into someone I barely recognized, distant, demanding, and cold. She started visiting less, except when she needed something. At first it was little things, a loan here, a favor there. Then it became bigger. She wanted control of my businesses, my bank accounts. She started asking questions that sent chills down my spine. "Do you have a will, Mom? Who's everything going to when you're gone?" I laughed it off, but deep down, I saw the hunger in her eyes. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone in my kitchen. She thought I was out in the garden. She whispered to someone. If she signs it soon, I'll be set for life. If not, I'll make her. The words sliced through me. My own daughter was plotting behind my back. When I stepped into the room, she quickly ended the call, faking a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I should have confronted her then. Instead, I watched her. I listened. And I started to prepare. Weeks passed, and Linda's visits became more erratic. She brought strangers to my home, men with tattoos, a woman who barely spoke. They looked at my house the way vultures look at roadkill. I played dumb, offering them tea, acting as if I didn't notice how their eyes scanned every corner. Then one night, she showed up with papers. "It's just a precaution, Mom," she said sweetly, pushing the will toward me. "You should sign this, just in case something happens." I looked her in the eye and said, "Not tonight." That night, I hid the original deeds, the real will, and a set of documents she didn't know existed. Because I knew the daughter standing in my kitchen wasn't the child I raised. She was something else now, something dangerous. But the most chilling moment came a few days later. I found a receipt in her purse, shovels, rope, plastic sheets. I stared at it, my hands trembling, and realized the depth of her darkness. I didn't tell a soul. Instead, I waited. The day she called me to take a drive was the day my heart steeled itself. She drove me out to the edge of our property, where the trees thicken and the earth is damp and soft. She made me walk under the moonlight, and there I saw it, the hole in the ground, waiting like an open mouth. She turned to me with eyes full of something I can only call greed mixed with hate. That's when she said it, those words that would be burned into my memory forever. Sign the will or sleep in it. But here's what she didn't know. When she pointed to that grave, she was pointing to her own fate. Because the name already etched into the stone behind her was not mine. It was hers. The figure who stepped out of the car that night? That wasn't a coincidence. That was part of the plan I had been weaving long before Linda thought she was the hunter. And when that figure spoke, her world began to unravel. Who was it? And why did my daughter's hands shake, as if she'd seen a ghost? The figure that stepped out of the car was someone Linda thought was long gone from our lives, someone she had betrayed just as she betrayed me. It was her ex-husband, Mark. The shock on her face was almost enough to make her drop the shovel. "Mark," she stammered, her voice cracking. "What are you doing here?" He didn't answer her right away. Instead, he walked toward me with steady steps, his eyes locked on hers. He had aged since the last time I saw him. Lines deeper, hair more silver than black, but his presence was strong. He stood beside me, like a shield. "I'm here," he said calmly, "because Eleanor called me." Linda's jaw dropped. You called him?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. "I called him weeks ago. I told him everything. About the threats. About the will. About you." Linda's face twisted in rage. "You went behind my back?" she shouted, her grip tightening on the shovel. "No," I replied softly. "I protected myself. From my own daughter." Mark stepped closer to her. "I warned you, Linda. I told you that if you kept walking down this road, it would end badly." His voice was cold, but there was an undertone of sadness. "You don't know what she's like," Linda screamed, pointing at me as if I were the villain. "She's controlling. She wants to keep everything for herself. I deserve it. Everything she is should be mine." I looked at her, my heart breaking into pieces I could never put back together. "Deserve it," I whispered. "Linda, I gave you everything. I sacrificed my life for you. And this is how you repay me? By digging my grave." For a second, her eyes softened, almost as if the little girl I once knew peeked through. But it was gone as quickly as it came. She raised the shovel as if to threaten us both. "I'm not leaving here empty-handed," she hissed. That's when Mark reached into his coat and pulled out something small but powerful, a voice recorder. He pressed play and Linda's own voice filled the night air. "If she doesn't sign, I'll make her. I'll bury her if I have to." Her knees buckled. You recorded me?" "I recorded everything," he said firmly. "And the police are on their way right now." Her face turned pale, But the fight in her wasn't over yet. She looked around, wild, like a trapped animal. You think the police will believe you? I'll tell them you two are lying. I stepped closer, my voice low and calm. They'll believe the evidence, Linda. And when they see whose name is already on that headstone behind you, they'll know the truth. Slowly, she turned to look. The moonlight illuminated the stone, and there it was, her name, Linda Hayes, carved deep into the granite. She gasped, stumbling back. You had this made? She whispered, trembling. No, I said softly. Your father did. Years ago, after your first attempt to take what wasn't yours. He knew what path you were walking. He warned me, and I prepared. The sound of sirens in the distance pierced the night air. Linda dropped the shovel, her face wet with tears, or maybe sweat from fear. She backed away from the grave, shaking her head. No, this isn't how it's supposed to go. But it was. It always was. The police cars screeched to a stop, lights flashing, officers pouring out. They took one look at the scene, me standing strong, Mark by my side, and Linda trembling beside a freshly dug grave, and the truth began to unfold. As they cuffed her, she screamed, "You'll regret this, Mother. You'll regret it." I didn't respond. I only watched as they dragged her away, the daughter I once loved disappearing into the night like a stranger. But the story didn't end there. No, that was only the beginning of the storm. Because what the police uncovered the next day would shake even me to my core. You won't believe what they found buried under the dirt she had dug. The night Linda was taken away in handcuffs, I thought the worst was over. But I was wrong. When the police secured the area, they brought in a forensic team to examine the grave she had dug. I stood there, shivering under a blanket they had draped over my shoulders, as flashlights flickered and officers whispered among themselves. Something was off. The hole she dug wasn't just a shallow pit. It was deeper than necessary, lined with something that made my stomach twist. An officer called out, "Ma'am, you may want to step back." I obeyed, watching as they carefully climbed into the pit. Moments later, one of them pulled out a heavy black bag, covered in dirt, tied with rope. My heart pounded. The bag was bigger than I expected. They laid it on the ground and unzipped it. Inside was a chilling discovery. Bundles of cash, documents with forged signatures, my forged signature, and photos of me, taken without my knowledge, in my garden, in my kitchen, even while I slept in my chair. A wave of nausea hit me. Linda had been stalking me, tracking my every move. But that wasn't all. Beneath the cash and papers, there was something far worse. A small box, wrapped in plastic. When the officers opened it, I gasped. Inside were vials of an unknown liquid, syringes, and a note that read, "Faster than the grave." The chief investigator looked at me grimly. "Mrs. Hayes, it seems your daughter was planning more than one way to end this." Tears burned my eyes. How had my child fallen so far? Greed had eaten her soul. Still, I stood tall because I had to. She wanted me weak, but I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. As they sealed the evidence, one officer approached me. "There's something else, ma'am," he said quietly. He handed me a sealed envelope pulled from the bottom of the grave. My name was written on it in Linda's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter inside chilled me to the bone. "You never loved me enough to give me what I deserve. If I can't have it while you're alive, I'll take it when you're gone. This is my last warning." I clutched the letter to my chest, not because it hurt, though it did, but because it confirmed what I feared. This was only the beginning. The following morning, the media swarmed my home. News vans lined the street, reporters shouting questions. "Did your daughter try to kill you? What was buried in that grave? Will you press charges?" I said nothing. Not because I was afraid, but because the truth was far more complex than they could ever report. Mark stayed by my side, helping me navigate the chaos. But even he couldn't shield me from what happened next. 3 days later, Linda made bail. She was out, and she was angrier than ever. I received the first sign that she wasn't done when I found my back door wide open one night. The alarm had been disabled. Nothing was stolen, But a single item was left on my kitchen table, a fresh rose, its thorns still sharp, and a note beneath it. You think this is over? I'm just getting started. Mark wanted me to move, to hide, but I refused. This was my home, my life. I would not run from my own child. But then the phone calls began. At first, silence on the line. Then whispers. Then threats. Each one colder than the last. You should have signed. The grave wasn't deep enough. Next time, you won't see me coming. The police increased their patrols, but I knew Linda was slipping through the cracks. She was watching me again. And then came the night I found muddy footprints leading from the woods to my back door. I followed them with a flashlight, my heart pounding. They led to the edge of my property, where a second grave had been started. This time, there was no headstone. Just an open hole, waiting. But what Linda didn't know was that I had already set my trap. Because I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was fighting back. What happened next will shock you because the hunter quickly became the hunted. The night I found that second grave, I knew Linda had crossed a line she could never return from. She wasn't just desperate anymore. She was dangerous. The police had promised to watch my house, but they couldn't watch every shadow, every tree, every sound that crept through the night. So I decided to stop waiting for her to strike again. I would take control of the game. Mark was the only one I trusted. Together, we installed cameras all around the property, hidden ones she wouldn't spot. I changed the locks, reinforced the doors, and even added motion sensors inside the house. But the real trap wasn't any of that. The real trap was psychological. I started to act weak on purpose. I left my curtains open, let her see me through the windows moving slowly, dragging my feet as if fear had broken me. I made her believe she still had power over me. Because when you're hunting a predator, you make them believe they're the hunter. Days passed. The threatening notes kept coming, slipped under my door, left on my car, even tucked into the pages of my Bible. It's almost time. No one will hear you scream. You should have signed. Each one pushed me closer to anger than fear. And then came the night she returned. It was storming, heavy rain pounding the roof, wind howling through the trees. Perfect cover for someone with dark intentions. I sat in my living room with the lights dimmed, pretending to doze in my chair. But I wasn't asleep. I was waiting. The cameras were rolling. Mark was hidden nearby, watching from his car with a clear view of my back porch. At exactly midnight, I heard the back door click. Slowly, it creaked open. I kept my eyes closed, my breathing steady, as soft footsteps approached. The smell of wet earth filled the room. She was soaked from the rain, her clothes clinging to her like a second skin. I could hear her breathing, shallow, sharp. She was carrying something. I didn't have to look to know it was the shovel. You should have signed, Mother, she whispered, so close I could almost feel her breath. I opened my eyes slowly, locking my gaze on hers. For a moment, she froze, startled by my calmness. You're not scared, she hissed. No, I said softly. Because you're standing exactly where I wanted you to. Before she could react, floodlights blazed on outside, blinding her through the windows. Mark rushed in, followed by 2 officers who had been waiting just out of sight. Linda screamed, swinging the shovel wildly, but the officers grabbed her, forcing her to the ground. She fought like a cornered animal, kicking, clawing, screaming curses at me. You'll pay for this, she shrieked as they cuffed her. I'll make you regret this. I stood up slowly, my hands steady, my voice calm. No, Linda. You've already written your regret. The officers dragged her out into the storm, her screams fading into the night. But as the door closed and the rain drowned out the chaos, I felt no victory. Only sorrow. How did it come to this? My own child, consumed by greed and hatred, now facing the life she chose. Yet deep down I knew it wasn't over. She had been caught before. She had gotten out before. And when a heart is filled with that much darkness, it doesn't die easily. The next morning the police called me. They had found something else, another letter, hidden in the pocket of her jacket. It wasn't just a threat this time. It was a plan. Names, addresses, times. She had been plotting to take out anyone she thought stood in her way. including Mark. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about me anymore. She was willing to destroy anyone to get what she wanted. Mark wanted to leave town, to take me somewhere safe, but I refused. If I run, I told him, she wins. I decided to stay and face whatever came next, because I wasn't afraid of my own daughter anymore. I was ready for her. But then, only 2 nights later, I woke to find my window open, the curtains blowing in the cold night air. On my nightstand, a single muddy fingerprint and a note. You can trap me, you can cage me, but you'll never stop me. Watch your back. Linda had escaped custody. And this time, she wasn't alone. The moment I saw that note on my nightstand, I knew Linda had crossed into something far more terrifying than before. She wasn't acting alone anymore. The fingerprints weren't hers. They were larger, smeared, belonging to someone else. This wasn't just my daughter's obsession anymore. She had allies, people as desperate and ruthless as she was. Mark stayed the night after the break-in. He paced the living room with his fists clenched, checking the locks every few minutes. Eleanor, he said, his voice shaking, this isn't safe anymore. She's not just coming for you. She's coming for everyone close to you. We need to leave. But I refused.
No, Mark.
This is my home. I won't be driven out of it by fear. He sighed, but he stayed by my side. He knew better than to argue when my mind was set. Instead, we worked together to fortify the house even more, turning it into a fortress. Cameras, alarms, reinforced doors, everything was in place. But deep down, I knew this wouldn't stop her. Linda wasn't planning to break in and steal anymore. She was planning to strike when I least expected it. 2 nights later, it happened. I was in the kitchen, making tea, when every light in the house suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed me whole. The power had been cut. My heart pounded as I grabbed the flashlight I kept on the counter. The beam sliced through the shadows, but it felt useless against the suffocating darkness. Then, through the kitchen window, I saw movement, 2 figures in the yard, silhouettes against the faint moonlight. They were moving fast, circling the house. One of them was Linda. I knew her stance, the way she carried herself even in the shadows. The other was a man, taller, broader, carrying something heavy in his hand. Mark burst into the kitchen, a baseball bat in his grip. They're here, he said, his voice tight with adrenaline. The cameras were still running, powered by a backup battery. I prayed they would capture everything. As we crept through the house, the sound of footsteps echoed outside. Closer, closer. The back door rattled. Then, glass shattered in the living room. They were inside. We backed into the hallway, every nerve in my body screaming. I could hear Linda's voice, soft and venomous, calling out, "Mother, where are you hiding? You can't keep me out forever." The man's voice followed, deep and cold. "Let's finish this." They moved through the house, opening doors, smashing things, searching for me. Mark held the bat tight, ready to swing, but I grabbed his arm. "No," I whispered. "Not yet." We retreated to the upstairs hallway, where my final trap waited. Earlier that day, I had rigged a tripwire across the top of the stairs, barely visible in the dark. Behind it, I placed a heavy shelf, balanced just enough that a single pull of the wire would send it crashing down. We waited, holding our breath, as their footsteps climbed the stairs. I could see the shadow of the man first, his frame looming, his steps heavy. Behind him, Linda, her face twisted with a mix of fury and triumph. When they were halfway up, I yanked the wire. The shelf came crashing down with a thunderous crack, slamming into the man and sending him tumbling backward. He screamed as he hit the floor below, unconscious or worse. Linda shrieked, barely avoiding the falling debris. She scrambled to her feet, rage burning in her eyes. "You think you can stop me with tricks?" she screamed. "You're pathetic." I stepped forward, flashlight in one hand, my voice strong. "No, Linda. I'm not pathetic. I'm prepared." For a moment, she hesitated. And that's when Mark lunged, grabbing her and pinning her to the wall. She fought like a wild animal, kicking, clawing, spitting. but he held her until the wail of sirens filled the air. The police had arrived. They had been watching the cameras remotely and came as soon as they saw the attack. Officers stormed in, dragging Linda away screaming, "This isn't over. You'll never be safe. I'll come back. I'll always come back." As they loaded her into the patrol car, I looked into her eyes one last time. I didn't see my daughter anymore. I saw a stranger who had chosen darkness. The man she brought with her was taken away on a stretcher, unconscious and handcuffed. I never even learned his name. But just when I thought the nightmare was finally ending, the police gave me news that froze my blood. Linda wasn't just facing charges this time. She was part of something bigger, an organized group that preyed on the elderly for their assets. She had been working with them for months, maybe years. And even behind bars, she still had people on the outside. The war wasn't over. It had only shifted to a new battlefield. 2 weeks later, I received a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single sentence: "The headstone wasn't just for her, it's for you too." And this time, I knew the danger was far from over. I sat at my kitchen table, the threatening letter trembling in my hands, my tea gone cold. The words were burned into my mind. The headstone wasn't just for her, it's for you too. This wasn't just Linda's madness anymore. This was a network, a hive of greed and violence that fed off the vulnerable. Mark urged me to leave town, to disappear somewhere safe, but my gut told me that running wouldn't save me. These people would find me wherever I went. They wanted my assets, my home, my life. And Linda, even locked behind bars, still had the power to direct them. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, clutching my late husband's old revolver, the one I swore I'd never have to use. The rain beat against the glass, and the wind howled like the cries of the past. Every creak of the house, every shadow outside sent a jolt through me. I wasn't paranoid, I was prepared. The next morning, the police came with news. The man Linda brought with her, the one knocked out by the falling shelf, had died in custody. His death was suspicious. Poisoned food, they said. Someone silenced him before he could talk. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a crime. This was a web, and I was at the center of it. I tightened security even more, but fear still lurked. Then, late one night, my phone rang. An unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. A distorted voice rasped through the line. "You should have signed when you had the chance. She's not the only one who wants you gone." Before I could respond, the line went dead. 2 nights later, my security cameras picked up something chilling. 2 men, faces covered, prowling around my property. They didn't try to break in, they were studying the house, mapping it out. One of them even stared straight at the camera before smashing it. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, the men were gone. They told me to stay somewhere safe, but I was done being a victim. Instead, I devised a plan, one that would expose every single person involved. I contacted a private investigator, an old friend of Mark's who owed him a favor. Together, we dug into Linda's connections. What we uncovered was worse than I imagined. A group of people who lured elderly homeowners into signing over their estates, using threats, intimidation, and even murder. Linda had fallen in with them, and she had been feeding them names. My name was at the top of their list. But we also found something else. Financial records tying Linda to the group's leader. And that leader? Someone who had been hiding in plain sight. My own neighbor, Harold, the sweet old man who always waved at me from across the street. I didn't believe it at first, but the evidence was undeniable. Harold was the mastermind, using his friendly demeanor to stay unnoticed. He had been watching me for months, waiting for Linda to finish what she started. That night, I watched Harold through my window as he watered his garden, his smile as harmless as ever. But I knew better. I knew the wolf behind the sheep's clothing. Mark wanted to confront him, but I told him no. "We let him think he's winning," I said. "Then we take everything from him, just like they try to take everything from me." So I invited Harold over for tea. He accepted with a smile, but his eyes gave him away, cold, calculating, assessing. As we sat across from each other, sipping tea in my kitchen, He leaned in slightly and said in a voice so soft it almost disappeared under the ticking clock, "You're tougher than we thought, Eleanor. But toughness only delays the inevitable." I smiled back, hiding the recorder in my lap. "Is that a threat, Harold?" He smirked. "It's a promise." The moment he left, I sent the recording to the private investigator, who forwarded it to the police. But I knew Harold wouldn't sit back and wait for them to catch him. He would strike first. That night, the power went out again. I grabbed my revolver, standing in the dark hallway, heart pounding. Then, a shadow moved across the living room. A voice whispered, "It's time." Before I could react, the back door burst open. Harold wasn't alone. The back door slammed against the wall with a crack that echoed through the house. Rain poured in with the wind, and 3 shadows slipped inside like wraiths. I gripped the revolver tighter, my pulse hammering in my ears. The storm outside roared, drowning out every sound except my own shallow breathing. Harold stepped into the dim light, no trace of his usual friendly facade. His eyes were sharp, his grin twisted. "You should have signed, Eleanor. You should have made this easy." Behind him, 2 masked men fanned out, each carrying something worse than a weapon, coiled ropes and duct tape. They weren't here to scare me anymore. They were here to end me. I took a step back, keeping my revolver hidden behind my thigh. "So this is it?" I said calmly, though my hands trembled. "You come into my home to kill me?" Harold chuckled darkly. "Kill you? Oh no. We're going to make you disappear. An old woman who wandered into the storm and never came back. By the time they find your body, if they do, it'll be too late. Everything will already be ours." Lightning split the sky, casting an eerie glow across the room. For a moment, Harold's face looked almost demonic. The masked men moved closer, their footsteps silent against the wooden floor. My back brushed the hallway wall. I had no more room to retreat. Then I remembered the trap I had prepared for this moment. With one quick motion, I pressed the small remote in my pocket. Hidden floodlights I had installed earlier blazed to life, blinding them all. Harold cursed, shielding his eyes. The masked men staggered back. I didn't waste a second. I raised the revolver and fired a single shot into the ceiling. The deafening blast froze them in place. "Not another step," I said, my voice shaking but strong. "You think you can scare me? I've survived worse than you. This house is mine, my life is mine, and you will not take either from me." For a brief second, none of them moved. Then Harold snarled, "Get her." Before they could rush me, a crash erupted from the front door. Mark and the private investigator charged in with 2 police officers behind them. Chaos exploded. One of the masked men lunged at me, but Mark tackled him to the ground. The other tried to flee, only to be grabbed by the officers. Harold swung a crowbar, narrowly missing me as I ducked. He tried to run, but the investigator caught him by the collar and slammed him to the floor. The officers swarmed him, pinning him down as he thrashed and cursed. "You think this changes anything?" Harold spat as they cuffed him. "We have people everywhere. She'll never be safe. None of you will." I stepped closer, looking him dead in the eye. "No, Harold. You won't be safe. Not in prison. Not anywhere. Because the truth is out now, and your empire is falling apart." As they dragged him away, the storm began to die down, leaving only the sound of rain dripping from the eaves. The men who came with him were let out in chains, their masks pulled off to reveal faces full of fear. I sank to my knees, tears mixing with rainwater on the floor. For the first time in weeks, I felt a wave of relief, but also a deep sadness. My own daughter had dragged me into this darkness, and now she was somewhere out there, orchestrating chaos from her cell. The police promised me protection, but I knew Linda wasn't done. She still had people, she still had power, and most of all, she still had hatred burning inside her. As they loaded Harold and his men into the police cars, I noticed something glinting on the porch. I walked over and picked it up, a locket I had given Linda when she was a little girl. Inside was a photo of us smiling, long before everything went wrong. Scribbled on the back of the photo were the words, "You can never bury me, Mother. I'll always come back." The fight wasn't over. That night, as I locked my doors and sat in the dark with Mark by my side, I knew the next move would be hers. Because the war with my daughter had only reached its middle, and the next strike would be deadlier than anything before. The days following Harold's arrest were strangely quiet, almost too quiet. The news was everywhere. Elderly woman outsmarts criminal ring led by neighbor, the headline screamed. Reporters camped outside my home, eager to capture a glimpse of the brave widow who brought down a syndicate. But behind the cameras, I knew this story wasn't finished. Linda hadn't disappeared into the shadows. She was waiting. 3 weeks later, I received a call from the prison. The warden's voice was tense. Mrs. Hayes, your daughter, she escaped during a transport. There was an ambush. My knees almost gave way. Mark caught me before I fell. She's out. I whispered, my voice barely audible. Yes, the warden replied. We believe she had inside help. She's considered armed and extremely dangerous. You need to stay somewhere secure until we locate her. But nowhere was secure. Not with Linda. That night, I locked every door, every window. The officers stationed outside kept watch, but I knew she was smarter than they gave her credit for. She wouldn't attack when they expected. She would wait until the fear had dulled, until the guards relaxed, and then she would strike. The first sign came at midnight. The power flickered and died again, but this time the backup lights didn't come on. I grabbed the revolver and my flashlight, heart pounding. Mark stood by the hallway, a bat in his hands. She's here, he said, his voice steady but tense. A slow, deliberate tapping echoed from the back porch. Tap, tap, tap. I moved toward the sound, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. When I reached the door, I froze. There, hanging from the handle, was a small white envelope. Inside was a single black feather and a note. The grave is ready, Mother. This time, no tricks. Before I could react, a window shattered in the living room. Glass rained down, and a figure slipped through like a shadow. Linda. She was thinner, her hair wild, her eyes glowing with madness. You thought you could beat me, she hissed. You thought you could take everything from me? Linda, stop this. I cried, stepping back. The revolver aimed, but my hands shaking. You're my daughter. This isn't you. She laughed, a chilling sound that made my blood run cold. Oh, this is exactly me. The me you made, ignored, unloved, left to rot while you kept everything for yourself. You had everything, I whispered, tears filling my eyes. You had my love. Love doesn't pay the bills, she screamed, lunging forward with a knife in her hand. Mark jumped in, swinging the bat, but Linda was quick. She slashed at him, cutting his arm, and he fell back with a cry. I aimed the revolver, my heart breaking, and fired, not to kill, but to stop her. The bullet tore into the wall inches from her head. For a second, she froze, her knife trembling. Then she smirked. You can't do it. You can't kill me. You're right, I said, lowering the gun slightly. But I don't have to. Suddenly, the front door burst open, police officers stormed in, their guns drawn. Linda spun around, but it was too late. They tackled her, pinning her to the floor as she screamed and fought. You'll regret this, Mother, she shrieked as they dragged her away. This isn't the end. I'll see you in hell before I see you lose. As the officers carried her out, one of them turned to me. We'll make sure she never gets out again. But I wasn't so sure. I had seen the fire in her eyes, the kind of fire that doesn't die easily. That night, I patched Mark's arm and sat with him until dawn. The house was quiet again, but my heart wasn't. I knew Linda's story wasn't over. Even locked away, she had ways of reaching me. And my fear was confirmed when the investigator called early the next morning. Eleanor, he said, his voice grave. We've intercepted a message she sent from inside. It says, the headstone is still waiting. Linda was still out there in spirit, and the storm was still gathering strength. Because what happened next would change everything. The days after Linda's second capture felt like walking on cracked ice, quiet, but every step threatened to break the surface. I tried to live normally, watering my plants, baking bread like I used to, but the fear lingered in every shadow. Even with police protection, I felt her presence, as if her eyes were always on me. 2 weeks later, the inevitable happened. It was a foggy morning when the police called to say the prison van transporting Linda to a court hearing had been ambushed. 2 guards were dead, and Linda had vanished once again. The voice on the phone was grim. "Mrs. Hayes, we believe she's coming for you. Leave town immediately." But I didn't leave. Instead, I fortified my home one last time and prepared myself. If she came, I would be ready. This wouldn't be another night of fear. It would be the night everything ended. That evening, I placed the revolver on the table, set a chair facing the front door, and waited. Mark begged me to leave, to hide, but I told him, "No, this ends here. She won't stop until one of us is gone." Hours passed. Midnight came. The fog outside thickened, and then I heard it, the creak of the front gate, the slow crunch of footsteps on the gravel. My heart pounded, but my hands were steady. The door creaked open. Linda stepped inside, her clothes torn, her hair wild, her eyes burning like coals. She no longer looked like my daughter. She looked like a ghost of what she used to be. "You should have signed," she hissed, stepping closer, knife glinting in her hand. I stood, facing her head-on. "No, Linda. You should have lived. You chose greed over love, and it's killing you." She screamed, lunging at me. I dodged, grabbing the revolver, but before I could pull the trigger, she knocked it from my hand. The two of us struggled, crashing into furniture, shattering glass. She was strong, too strong, but I wasn't weak anymore. With every ounce of strength, I pushed her back. She stumbled toward the fireplace, the knife slipping from her grasp. The fire roared behind her as she glared at me with pure hatred. "You think you've won?" she spat. "Even if I die, you'll never be free of me." I picked up the knife, holding it firmly, my hands trembling but my voice clear. "You're right, Linda. I'll never be free of the memory of you. But tonight, I will be free of your madness." Before she could move, Mark appeared behind her, grabbing her arms and forcing her to the ground. She thrashed and screamed, but this time the police were seconds away. They stormed in, pinning her down once and for all. As they dragged her out, Linda's eyes locked on mine. "This isn't over, Mother," she snarled. "I'll haunt you forever." I whispered back, tears streaming down my face. "No, Linda. You're already gone." She was taken away, screaming into the night, and this time the officers promised she would be sent to a maximum security facility where escape would be impossible. I believed them, but my heart still ached. When the house was quiet again, I walked to the grave she had dug so many months ago. The earth was still scarred, the headstone still standing with her name carved into it. I stood there for a long time whispering, "I forgive you, but I'll never forget." The storm had finally passed, but the scars would remain forever. As the sun rose, I felt a strange peace. I had survived. I had fought. And I had won, not by killing my daughter, but by refusing to let her destroy me. The lesson I want you to take from my story is this: evil can wear the face of someone you love, but you must never let it take your soul. Stand strong. Protect what's yours. And never, ever let fear control you. If this story touched your heart, showed you the strength of quiet power, and reminded you to never give up, like, comment, and subscribe. Your story matters too, and someone out there needs to hear it.